The word sauerkraut is a German term literally that translates to sour cabbage. Historians believe that sauerkraut preparation began between 1550 and 1750 AD. The microbial diversity that you'll find in sauerkraut really depends on climatic condition and geographical region. So that means a sauerkraut that was made in Melbourne versus Hamburg might have some of the same bacteria strains, but it's highly probable that they'll also have different ones. And that can be said at the micro level too. So strains in my sauerkraut in my kitchen will have different strains than the sauerkraut that you'll find in your kitchen. However, there are a couple notable strains found in sauerkraut during lactic acid fermentation that you should know about, which include Leukonostoc and Lactobacillus. Let's start with the largest genus of lactic acid bacteria, Lactobacillus. Studies have found across the board that Lactobacillus brevis and Lactobacillus plantarum are found in all fermented vegetables. Lactobacillus plantarum is a very versatile and flexible species. It's able to adapt to stressors better than any of the other lactic acid bacteria. Because of this, it can resist the acidic environment of the stomach when it passes through and temporarily colonize the intestines very well. L. plantarum also boasts significant antioxidant activity, and it's able to destroy pro-inflammatory cytokines. This makes it an ideal candidate to accelerate gut repair and maintain intestinal permeability. L. plantarum also is good at destroying oxidative stress and balancing adrenal levels because of its psychotropic properties. Lactobacillus brevis is another prevalent species of Lactobacillus that's able to withstand highly acidic environments and survive the passage of the gastrointestinal tract. Many studies have isolated the species and found several different novel traits. For example, Lactobacillus brevis is known to increase tryptophan levels in the blood, which is a precursor for serotonin and melatonin. Both of these hormones are crucial for a good night's rest. But that's not all. It also inhibits production of IgE antibodies and histamines and promotes natural killer cell activity. All of these actions help to fight off infections and allergies and even demonstrates tumor formation response. Lactobacillus is one of the genre of bacteria that's known for its benefits for mental health. Studies are now showing that there's the gut-brain axis where bacteria is involved in physiological processes such as energy balance and the enteric nervous system. Scientists are now calling this our second brain. Although it's not well understood right now, there's a lot of new research coming out with some really fascinating results. Leukonostoc is the other genus of lactic acid bacteria that's found to be most widespread. In particular, Leukonostoc mesenteritis is incredibly well adapted to the fermented vegetable niche. It's able to withstand high gut pH, a very wide range, as well as inhabit areas with high bile salt concentration. Studies have shown that Leukonostoc mesenteritis increases IgA antibodies in the mucous membranes, which enhances immune function by keeping pathogens at bay. Other research has also found that this species is able to maintain tight junctions and gut permeability, which is a dominating feature in leaky gut syndrome. However, Leukonostoc's most distinguishing feature is that it has such a positive effect on the proliferation of bacteria in the intestines. It's as if its sole purpose in life was to repopulate our gut. All right, now that our brains are full of microbe facts, let's learn how to make some traditional German sauerkraut. Okay, so making sauerkraut is the best place to start when you're learning how to ferment because it's made of only cabbage and salt, so it's really hard to go wrong. Some people like to add juniper berries or caraway seeds for added flavor. I've even added garlic in the past, but we're gonna stick to the basics. The first thing you want to do is pick out a high quality cabbage. You want it to be as fresh as possible and organic. The reason for this is because fermentation enhances the nutrients, and so you really want to give your fermented product a good start. All right, so what we're gonna need to make sauerkraut is 1 head of cannonball cabbage, a tablespoon of salt, a glass bowl, and a quart-sized mason jar. The first thing we always want to do is sterilize and clean our kitchen surface and utensils. If you've ever been through a brewery tour, you'll notice that it's a very sterile environment. That's because we don't want to introduce any unwanted microorganisms into our fermented products. So the first thing I do is wash everything with hot soap and water. And then because I don't have a dishwasher, which you can use the heat cycle to sterilize, I use my oven. I set it at 120 degrees Celsius and just put all of the glass stuff in there for 10 minutes, and that kills anything that could possibly be on your containers. So I do that, and then when I wash, I actually have a special sponge that I reserve just for fermentation so I don't contaminate with other things in my kitchen. So it won't hurt you if you get bad microorganisms that take over in your sauerkraut. It's not gonna hurt you, it's just gonna produce bad smells and off-putting flavors. So it's just not going to be as delicious. So we'll always start with a sterile kitchen. If it seems too overwhelming to you, it's fine to just use hot soap and water. You can make a bleach solution even and just spray it in your kitchen. That does a good job at killing bacteria. We'll start by washing the cabbage, which I already have here, and then taking the outer layers of the leaves off. You want to reserve a few of these because we'll use them in the end for covering the sauerkraut. So I'll just set these aside. And then what you want to do is remove the core of the cabbage here. So do that. It takes 1 cabbage for about a quart of sauerkraut. I'm gonna chop the cabbage really coarsely by hand. You can also use a food processor, which makes it really uniform, but I think the variety of sizes adds a really good texture to the sauerkraut in the end. So it's all a preference thing, but that's what I find to be the best. As you transfer the cabbage to the bowl, you can start sprinkling salt to the mix. My rule of thumb is always 1 tablespoon of salt to 1 head of cabbage. So, just like choosing the best ingredients for your vegetables, choosing the best salt is also really important. The one you don't want to choose is iodized salt because iodine inhibits beneficial bacterial growth. The best salt, the most ideal salt, is full of minerals and it's unrefined. With studies showing microplastics in sea salt now, I've actually just been solely using Himalayan salt. It's like a rock salt that's full of minerals. It's usually pink or red in color. Okay. Now for my favorite part, massaging the cabbage. We massage the cabbage to break down the cell walls. And the salt, actually, do you remember learning about osmosis in biology class? The salt is what draws the water out of the cabbage because the water wants to go to the area with the highest solute concentration. So, you have to do this for a little while. You want to have a really juicy brine by the end because it's an anaerobic process, remember? So all of the sauerkraut needs to be kept underneath the liquid when it's fermenting. And we'll just add a little bit more cabbage at a time, and this is probably the longest part. Once we have enough juice, we can start transferring the mix into our jar. So there's tools out there called like the kraut pounder or the vegetable stomper that have been created to help with this process, but I've had one in the past, and to be honest, if your fist fits in the jar, it's a very redundant tool. So you want to compress between each time you add some of the mix, and then you want to compress and get all of the air pockets out. Push it down firmly and see that there's juices rising to the top of the kraut mixture. Remember, it's an anaerobic process, so there has to be liquid covering your kraut. Once you have all of your sauerkraut mix in there, you want to leave about a 1/4 to 1/2 inch of headspace. And then we can take one of our reserved cabbage leaves to keep the mix submerged under the liquid. This makes sure that it ferments properly from start to finish and that no mold will produce on the top as long as it's under that liquid. There's also products made for this, like little glass fermentation weights that you can stick in there, but as long as you can secure the leaf around the edges, it works perfectly fine. Once I have it in, I'll take my lid and I'll secure it tightly. Basically, with this lid, it's going to form pressure while it's fermenting, and you're going to want to, once a day, just release the pressure. I call it burping your ferment. But there's also products where there's lids with airlocks, or crocks are made with an airlock seal as well. So it's just, if you're doing this setup, make sure you release the pressure, otherwise you might have a little explosion in your kitchen. You're free to decide how long you want to ferment your sauerkraut for. Anywhere between 2 to 4 weeks. I personally usually always let my ferment go for 1 month, but the temperature can really push your ferment faster or slower depending on what season it is. So in the summer, I'd say maybe even 2 weeks. In the winter, you might go as long as 2 months. You can always just taste your ferment though along the way. You can open it up, use a sterilized spoon, don't double dip, and try it and see how you like it. One thing to note is that as the pH decreases in your sauerkraut during the fermentation time, the diversity of the species also changes. So if you're going for gut diversity, one thing you could do is end your fermentation at different intervals and have like a 2-week sauerkraut, a 4-week sauerkraut, and that way you can ensure the greatest amount of biodiversity.